Imagine an entire city just swallowed by water. That's exactly what happened back in 2009. We're going to dive into the story of the catastrophic flood that hit Kurnool in Andhra Pradesh. And it's a story about a disaster that came out of nowhere, about immense loss, and, as you'll see, about some really incredible human resilience.
Okay, so to really get the shock of what happened, you've got to picture Kurnool before the flood. Think of a really vibrant city, right? It was famous for these amazing, ancient rocky temples and just bustling with thousands of tourists every single day. Life was, well, it was normal. Routine, predictable, full of color.
And then, just like that, everything changed. That routine shattered. The tourists were gone. The buses stopped running. And all those familiar colors of daily life were just replaced by the gloomy, churning gray of river water that was now flowing through the city streets.
So yeah, this is Kurnool we're talking about, in the Rayalaseema region. A big, bustling place, a district headquarters. We're talking about 500,000 people whose lives pretty much revolved around this daily flow of visitors and commerce. It was a place with real energy and deep tradition. So let's go back to the day before the disaster, September 27th. It had been raining heavily all day, one of those damp, cloudy, cold days. People just wrapped up their business and headed home, probably expecting nothing more than a wet evening. And, like any of us would, they went to sleep hoping for a brighter tomorrow. That hope? It was about to be completely washed away before dawn.
Because what came next wasn't a bright morning at all. It was a sound, a terrifying roar. The very rivers that gave the region its life were about to unleash a fury that no one had ever seen before. The timeline of those first 24 hours really shows just how fast everything fell apart.
I mean, the sheer speed of this was just staggering. It started with heavy rain overnight, okay? But by early morning, people weren't waking up to wet streets. They were waking up to roaring floodwaters inside their homes. By 10 a.m., the Central Water Commission was forecasting a record-breaking inflow of water. And by noon, just 2 hours later, that water was already engulfing the first floors of buildings. It happened that fast.
So yeah, this wasn't some slow creep. This was a violent, sudden disaster. The entire city was thrown into chaos. You have people trapped, absolutely desperate, scrambling to get to higher ground, seeking any help they could possibly find as they're watching this trauma unfold, this loss of everything they've ever known. And this wasn't just confined to the city, This catastrophe was unfolding across the entire district, on a scale that was pretty much impossible to comprehend at the time.
Think about this number for a second. 40,000. That's the estimated number of people who were forced onto their own rooftops, completely surrounded by a rising sea of water. 40,000 individual lives, just trapped, waiting, and hoping for rescue. And then there's 60 entire villages across the district were inundated. And many of them didn't just flood, they were completely submerged, literally wiped off the map by this deluge. And the water was deep. In places like the famous pilgrimage town of Mantralayam, the whole area was buried under a 10-foot sheet of water, and it stayed that way for 4 long days. So, you might be asking, where did all this water even come from? Well, it poured from 2 tributaries of the Krishna River. But the thing that turned a bad situation into a full-blown catastrophe was an infrastructure failure. The Sankesula barrage, which was supposed to control the river's flow, just couldn't handle the pressure. It breached in 2 places, and that unleashed a massive, uncontrolled flood wave directly towards the city. So when you're faced with a disaster of this magnitude, the immediate question is, what do you do? How do you even begin to respond? How do you rescue tens of thousands of people from a district that is now underwater? Well, the local government was quickly and completely overwhelmed. Calls for help went out, and the response was massive. The Army and Navy were mobilized. The National Disaster Response Force was rushed in from a neighboring state. You had aircraft and dozens of boats deployed in this frantic race to pluck people from rooftops. And on the ground, 30 relief camps were thrown up to try and shelter 25,000 people who had just lost everything. And amidst all of that chaos, you hear these just incredible moments of heroism. In one daring operation, an Indian Air Force helicopter crew rescued 15 farmers who were totally cut off, trapped by a raging stream. These were the glimmers of hope in the absolute darkest of time. But what happens after the helicopters leave, and after the waters finally, slowly recede? For the survivors, well, that's when the true scale of the devastation really becomes clear. The scene was just one of total destruction. The infrastructure was shattered. Roads and bridges gone. People's livelihoods were wiped out, with entire paddy fields that were just about to be harvested, completely ruined. People returned to find nothing but mud and debris where their homes once stood, and so tragically many farm animals who were fastened in their sheds were lost to the flood. To really understand this, we need to go from that big picture down to the small one. Let's look at the story of one survivor, a widow in her 40s with 4 children. For her and her family, this flood wasn't just a news event, it was the end of their world.
And this quote from her own words just paints this terrifying picture. Imagine the moment that surging water hit her small mud home. It didn't just flood, the entire structure simply collapsed. It just disintegrated around her and her children. Her story from that moment is just one of sheer survival. She managed to escape with her kids to a small patch of high ground by the road. For 2 days, they had nothing, no food, no water. Then a relief team found them. They were brought to a camp where they finally got some essential supplies. And then, seeing their plight, private donors stepped in, giving them more supplies and even building them a temporary shed to live.
In the face of that utter despair, having lost everything she owned, her response was one of profound gratitude. It's such a powerful testament to both the impact of that aid and the just incredible resilience of the human spirit.
And that really brings us to the core question this story leaves us with, doesn't it? The Colonel Flood was a story of immense destruction, but it was also a story of survival, of community, and of the help that strangers offer at a time of crisis. So it makes you wonder, when the water washes everything away, homes, possessions, livelihoods, what is truly left behind?